Wreck-It Ralph. Wreck-It Ralph is an animated movie from Disney Studios about a video game character that wants to change his lot in life. This film is actually two stories happening simultaneously. The first story is the story of Wreck-It Ralph himself, a video game character in the game Fix-It Felix, where he is, of course, the villain, and he's unhappy in that role. The second story stars Sarah Silverman as Vanellope von Schweetz, a character in a separate video game who is also unhappy in her role in that game. So, in the first story, in Ralph's story, John C. Reilly's Wreck-It Ralph is unhappy with his lot in life as a video game villain, mainly because within the confines of the video game, as a villain, he's treated as if he's a villain completely. The other Denzians of the video game Fix-It Felix are terrified of him, they're not friendly towards him, they shun him, and he wants a change. Meanwhile, in a separate video game called Sugar Rush, which is imagine a kart racing game set in the world of Candy Crush, Vanellope von Schweetz, played by Sarah Silverman, is a glitchy character who is banned from racing in a racing game, and she knows deep down in her heart that she was meant to be a racer. For a mentor character, for a wise guiding presence, Wreck-It Ralph is a member of a support group for other video game villains, and they impart to him the slightly dubious wisdom that it's okay to be a villain as long as you're pure in your heart. To be a bad guy, you don't have to be a bad person. This is an odd message as it sort of paves the way for kids to grow up to, oh, I don't know, experiment on animals, do any kind of a job that's actually evil, as long as when you go home to your family, you're not a bad person to them. It's a little weird of a message, but that's the message. For a wise guiding presence, Sarah Silverman is left with Ralph himself. However, in the beginning of the film, Ralph is not ready to be her wise guiding presence. Ralph has to essentially gain enlightenment in his own story before he's ready to help Vanellope gain enlightenment and complete her adventure. For both stories, the allies are Jane Lynch's Sergeant Calhoun, who is a character from a video game called Hero's Duty, a brand new HD first-person shooter, which in his quest, Ralph invades and causes a bit of mayhem, which brings her into the story. And Fix-It Felix himself, a character from Wreck-It Ralph's game, who's played by Jack McBrayer, who comes after Ralph to bring Ralph back home so that when the arcade opens the next morning, Ralph will be there and the game will not appear to be broken. This is a bad thing in the video game world. If your video game isn't functioning correctly, it becomes unplugged. And any game that's unplugged, all the people in the video game who don't escape it in time die. And the ones who do escape are out of work, unemployed, and homeless. So, Fix-It Felix needs to get Ralph back home. The villain of the piece is the Candy King, played by Alan Tudyk. The Candy King rules the racing game Sugar Rush, and while he appears to be benevolent, in fact he appears as sort of a false mentor character, he really has dark things in motion and he needs to be stopped. The other obstacles along the way, primarily you have the bugs, the villains from Hero's Duty, who Ralph inadvertently sets free to rampage other video games, namely Sugar Rush itself, as well as the other racers in the Sugar Rush game. These are your primary obstacles that must be overcome before the story can be completed. As in most animated films, each character carries their share of the comedy. However, they decided to make Sarah Silverman's character carry a little bit more of it. She's the character that's supposed to be funny. However, there's this thing that some people do where they decide to make the funny character be annoying as well. There's some people who seem to think annoying is funny. It's not. And so Sarah Silverman's character is hard to like. By the end of the film, you will like her, you'll be rooting for her, but you'll never stop wishing she wasn't as annoying as she is, because she's really, while it's not intensely, terribly annoying, it's consistently, unrelentingly annoying. And you just wish it wasn't there. You'd like her more if she wasn't so annoying. And for your moment of change, the moment when the heroes realize they must take on this quest. For Ralph, it comes when his video game has its 30th birthday. And within the video game, there's this grand 30th birthday party that is thrown for Fix-It Felix. And Ralph isn't invited despite the fact that he's in the game. He's shunned, he tries to crash the party and disaster ensues, and he realizes that nobody likes him. And he decides to do something to try to force them to like him. And that starts his quest. For Penelope, there's no one moment. She's always known that she was meant to be a racer. She can't shake it from her mind that she was meant to be a racer. And she decides to just try to be a racer. And when Ralph shows up, Ralph provides her with a little bit of incentive and a little bit of help in becoming the racer she knows she was meant to be. On the upside, this movie is fun, it's exciting, it's well animated, it's well acted, and I like the fact that the film actually a little bit parallels The Lord of the Rings. Ralph is kind of Frodo. If you've seen the movie, you know Ralph is the one that ends up facing a villain that is a darker version of himself. Not in video game terms, he's not facing Wreck-It Ralph Dark, but he's facing a villain that had similar motives to his own, and he has to defeat that villain. And in his defeat of that villain is the moment when he gains the enlightenment to become the mentor for Vanellope. And Vanellope is your Aragorn character. Vanellope is the character that is facing a challenge that, if she completes it, will heal the world, literally. And it's a great story. The Lord of the Rings is a great story, and Wreck-It Ralph, which is a smaller version of it, is also a great story. So there's your upside. It's just a good movie. And your downside. Your downside is simply how annoying Vanellope Sweets is. She just didn't need to be that annoying. I would have liked to have liked the character, and I just couldn't. And I rooted for her while waiting for her to get off screen. I wanted her to win and then go away. And they shouldn't do that with a character. So in the end, I've got to give Wreck-It Ralph a good 4 stars. I would have liked to have given it 5. If Vanellope Sweets hadn't been so annoying, it might have made 5. At least it would have been 4.5, and I would have had to have made that decision. But with her being that annoying, it was pretty easy to just drop it right at 4 and let it stay there. So that's my review of Wreck-It Ralph. So have you seen Wreck-It Ralph? And honestly, did you think it was more of a video game Toy Story or a video game Lord of the Rings? I have to go with Lord of the Rings, mainly because that's my theory. But what did you think? Let me know.